We need the Messiah to come, right? So for me, the red heifer is red for the blood of Jesus Christ.
9 Jewish priests, plot of land on the Mount of Olives, and 5 red heifers. All these elements are in place for what some Jews and Gentiles.
The ceremony needs to be performed right here on the Mount of Olives, looking directly into where the temple once stood.
In Jewish tradition, the red heifer sacrifice serves as a crucial purification ritual. It involves using the ashes of a specific red heifer to cleanse individuals of impurities acquired through contact with a corpse. Throughout history, since the era of Moses, only 9 red heifers have been offered as sacrifices. Now, as anticipation builds for the 10th sacrifice, many are reflecting on a prophecy that suggests such an event could mark the end of the world. What exactly is the red heifer sacrifice, and is there any link between it and the apocalypse? We delve into the significance of the red heifer sacrifices across the ages. According to belief, the red heifer prophecy indicates that its sacrifice signifies the beginning of the last days and is a crucial precursor for the second coming of Christ. In Jewish tradition, much anticipation surrounds the awaited arrival of the 10th red heifer. It's believed that this heifer is essential for the purification rituals associated with the reconstruction of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. Let's delve into the background of the red heifer and its prophecy. This prophecy revolves around the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem, famously known as the Third Temple. The original temple, constructed by Solomon, met its demise at the hands of the Babylonians in 586 BC. Later, Herod built the Second Temple, which stood during the time of Christ but was ultimately destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. Since then, Jerusalem hasn't seen the construction of a new temple, and Jews have eagerly awaited the opportunity to erect the Third Temple, as they believe it will signify the coming of the Messiah. However, a significant obstacle looms over the prospect of the Third Temple, which has been foretold in various scriptures. During the dominance of the Roman Empire, Jews were expelled from Jerusalem, and for nearly 2 millennia, their return in significant numbers was delayed. In the meantime, Muslims settled in the region and built a mosque and shrine atop what is believed to be the remains of the ancient Jewish temples. According to Muslim tradition, Muhammad, their revered prophet, left his footprints on a rock that is now guarded by the Dome of the Rock, marking his ascension to heaven on a sacred journey. This location holds immense significance for Muslims, ranking 3rd among their holiest sites worldwide. Jews have been returning in large numbers to Israel and Jerusalem, considering it their holiest site on earth because it's the sacred land originally promised to Abraham. Their migration traces back to Moses, leading them there after their captivity in Egypt. During their journey, as they constructed the tabernacle in the wilderness, they received the law of Moses, containing the 613 commandments outlined in the Torah, the initial 5 books of the Old Testament. This was because Israel declined to adhere to a higher law. Among these 613 Jewish laws is the Para Aduma, or red heifer, detailed extensively in Numbers 19, 2:10. According to Jewish tradition, this ritual is crucial for purifying the people, preparing them for temple worship. When the scripture mentions a red heifer, it's not referring to a cow with a vivid ruby red hue. Instead, it signifies a cow with a reddish-brown tone, which isn't particularly uncommon. The challenge lies not in finding such a coloration, but in locating one that meets all the qualifications. For some reason, the red heifer must be a minimum of 2 years old and fully red-haired by the time it enters its 3rd year. Even the presence of 2 differently colored hairs in close proximity, or 3 hairs spaced apart, will render it ineligible. Any physical imperfections that would disqualify sacred animals also disqualify a red heifer, and any form of work performed on it also invalidates its status. In this context, work extends to actions like someone resting on the animal or covering it with clothing, with the sole exception being if the covering is for the animal's protection. Finding a red heifer that meets the criteria is also quite rare due to several factors. Even placing a yoke on the cow without it doing any work will disqualify it. Additionally, the heifer's pregnancy or mating with a male are grounds for disqualification. Most of these specifications are outlined in the Mishnah, which is the oral tradition of the Jewish people, rather than in the Torah, consisting of the initial 5 books of the Old Testament, or the books of Moses. As the heifer ages, typically around 4 or 5 years old, it begins to develop other colored hairs, which also renders it ineligible. Rabbis meticulously inspect these animals, constantly searching for any flaws that could disqualify them. The process of performing this ritual is incredibly meticulous, even after finding a red heifer that meets all the criteria. Since Moses lived approximately 3,300 years ago, this ritual has been performed only 9 times. The inaugural sacrifice was conducted under the supervision of Moses himself, while the most recent one occurred over 2,000 years ago, preceding Christ's earthly ministry. According to Jewish belief, the initiation of the construction of the Third Temple, crucial for the Messiah's arrival, hinges upon the 10th red heifer sacrifice. However, earlier traditions suggest that the Messiah will personally oversee this sacrifice. Christians maintain that the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem must precede the return of Jesus Christ. Conversely, most Jews view the red heifer sacrifice as the initial step towards temple construction. In accordance with the specifications outlined in the book of Numbers chapter 19 and recent oral traditions, the Temple Institute, an organization dedicated to preparing for the reconstruction of the Third Temple in Jerusalem, has been diligently seeking red heifer candidates for many years. Reportedly, the Institute identified 3 potential candidates in 1997, 2002, and 2018. However, all 3 were swiftly disqualified. Presently, global attention is fixed on September 2022, when 5 red heifers were brought in from the United States, facilitated by an American farmer and evangelical Christian named Byron Stinson. Subsequently, one of the 5 has been deemed ineligible, while the observation of the remaining 4 continues. This seems like a complex passage discussing sensitive topics. Here's a rephrased version. It's intriguing to note that the red heifers are somehow connected to the tragic events of October 7, 2023 in Israel, orchestrated by Hamas. According to Abu Abida, the military spokesperson for the organization, the attack was motivated by their aim to disrupt Jewish rituals by targeting the 5 red heifers. It's tragic that 695 people, including 36 children, lost their lives in this attack. The intention is to construct the temple on the Mount of Olives, as the location for the red heifer sacrifice must be eastward of its current position. 12 years back, a parcel of land overlooking the Temple Mount on the Mount of Olives was acquired for this specific purpose. Rabbi Yick Mamo owns the site and collaborated with Byron Stinson to bring the 5 qualified red heifers to Israel. These heifers are approaching their 3rd year, the ideal age for the ritual. Many anticipate the ritual happening soon, before the heifers become too old for the sacrifice. The Temple Institute expresses their hope to conduct the ritual in the near future. The plot of land purchased a dozen years back, situated directly east of the Temple Mount, perfectly fits the criteria for hosting the red heifer ceremony. Mamo, speaking publicly recently, mentioned that the cows are nearing their crucial 3rd year. News from last month on all Israeli media outlets indicated the Temple Institute's eagerness to conduct the sacrifice before Passover 2024. Reportedly, a sizable altar has already been erected for this purpose by the project's team. This year, the Jewish community will observe Passover on April 22nd. Some speculate that due to March 29th coinciding with the Sabbath of the Red Heifer, the sacrifice might occur earlier. However, the Temple Institute itself asserts that they are awaiting divine guidance on the timing of the sacrifice. Now, let's delve into the procedure prescribed in the Book of Numbers for the Jewish community's execution of the red heifer sacrifice. The significant ritual of the red heifer. Embedded within the Old Testament lies one of its most significant yet lesser-known sacrificial decrees. The law concerning the red heifer, outlined in the 19th chapter of the book of Numbers. Like other sacrificial ordinances, this law was entrusted to the Israelites, serving as an enduring statute meant to guide those who encounter ritual impurity through contact with a corpse towards the awaited Messiah. In Jewish tradition, it's believed that only Moses fully comprehended this commandment known as chukat, and it's to be followed even when its rationale isn't entirely clear. According to the book of Numbers, God instructed Moses to have the Israelites breed a red heifer, which had to be spotless, free of blemishes, and never before yoked. The purpose behind this sacrifice was to cleanse Israel from the impurity associated with death or Levitical defilement. This particular sacrifice held distinct significance for several reasons. Unlike typical sin offerings, it took place outside the camp or sanctuary, involved complete incineration, and was performed once for all the children of Israel, lasting as long as its ashes remained effective. Additionally, unlike most sin offerings, the red heifer law stipulated a female animal, the para aduma, as the sacrificial offering. This deliberate selection of a female conveys a profound message, suggesting that the ceremony imparts life. The priest designated to conduct the ceremony, usually the eldest son of the high priest, would spend 7 days within the temple before the offering, being regularly sprinkled with the ashes from a previous sacrifice. On the day of the sacrifice, the red heifer would be led by the priest, adorned in his white priestly attire, to the designated site or sacrificial altar, where the elders of Israel awaited the ritual. The red heifer would be securely bound, its face directed westward towards the temple, and then slaughtered by the priest's right hand, collecting some of its blood in his left hand, which he would subsequently deposit into a cavity within the stack of wood composed of cedar, pine, and fig trees. Afterward, the priest would dip his finger into the blood, spraying it 7 times directly toward the most holy place of the temple. Following this, the priest would ignite the fire and introduce crimson, hyssop, and cedarwood into the heart of the roaring flames. The resulting ashes would then be collected by a ritually pure priest and placed outside the camp. Notably, the priest who conducted the heifer sacrifice would become ritually impure due to the offering. Subsequently, when the ashes were needed for ceremonial purification, a portion would be gathered into a vessel, mixed with spring water and hyssop, and sprinkled on those who had come into contact with corpses on the 3rd and 7th days following their interaction. Throughout history, spanning from the era of Moses to the collapse of the Second Temple, a mere 9 red heifers were sacrificed. Moses initiated the first, followed by Ezra with the second, while Simeon the just and Johanan the high priest each oversaw the preparation of 2. Elionai ben Hakayaf, Ananias, and Ishmael ben Farbus each contributed 1, as recorded in the Mishnah Para. But why is the red heifer so crucial, and for whom? Let's delve into its significance and the religious perspectives surrounding it. The importance of the red heifer. The red heifer holds immense importance across the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all of which closely observe its prophetic implications. This prophecy uniquely resonates with all 3 religions, as they regard Abraham as a prophet and the progenitor of their faiths. Given that Muslims comprise 25%, Christians 31.6%, and Jews 2% of the global population, this prophecy significantly impacts over half of humanity. The red heifer ritual has been performed only 9 times in history, and there's profound significance attached to the 10th occurrence. It's believed that the sacrifice of the red heifer will herald the advent of the last days and is deemed a prerequisite for the second coming of Christ. However, the interpretation of this event varies among different religions. Due to its importance, Jewish tradition advocates for initiating the process of rebuilding the temple on the Temple Mount to prepare the way for the Messiah. Both Christians and Jews uphold prophecies concerning the arrival of the Messiah. According to biblical predictions, following the reconstruction of Jerusalem's temple, it will face a siege, a scenario commonly referred to as Armageddon. However, just as the situation appears dire, Christ is prophesied to descend to the Mount of Olives. As his foot touches the ground, the mount splits, triggering a tremendous earthquake that obliterates the invading army, thereby saving the Jews. It's at this pivotal moment that the Jewish populace recognizes Jesus Christ as their Messiah and embraces Christianity, acknowledging the wounds on his hands and feet. The concluding portion of the prophecy is documented in Zechariah 13:6, which reads, "And one shall say unto him, What are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer, Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends." Many Christians adhere to the significance of the red heifer prophecy, believing it must precede the rebuilding of the temple, which is seen as a prerequisite for the second coming. While this assertion holds true, what's often overlooked is Christ's declaration during his earthly ministry that he fulfilled the Mosaic law, thereby exempting his followers from its observance, including the requirement of sacrificing a red heifer. Given the red heifer's symbolic association with Jesus Christ, many Christians haven't scrutinized this aspect deeply. However, it's worth noting that the red heifer prophecy has been fully realized. The challenge arises as Jews, despite their belief in Jesus, continue to adhere to the Mosaic law, including the anticipation of the Savior himself offering the 10th red heifer sacrifice, the 9th occurring prior to his ministry. Hence, although this ritual holds no essential significance from a Christian perspective, it's likely to be conducted eventually because Jews deem it necessary for the construction of the third temple in Jerusalem, their holy city. Nonetheless, there's apprehension that undertaking such a sacrifice could potentially trigger cataclysmic consequences given the complexities involved. Could a red heifer ritual trigger Armageddon? Examining the vista from the Mount of Olives, one can observe the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque situated atop the Temple Mount, widely believed to be the location of the original temples. Christians await developments, convinced that these events must transpire before the return of Jesus Christ, while Muslims currently oversee the Temple Mount and have erected their sacred structures there. Jews assert their rightful claim to the Temple Mount for their own temple. Although there is ample space for both religions, suggestions have arisen for a territorial division. However, neither side appears amenable to such a compromise. Consequently, throughout history, ethnic enclaves for Jews, Muslims, and various Christian denominations have been established within the confines of Jerusalem's walls. Even today, when touring Jerusalem, you'll find yourself wandering through the distinct neighborhoods designated for Muslims, Christians, and Jews, as these areas are designated for the diverse ethnic groups striving to coexist harmoniously within the city. In certain zones, passage is only granted after passing through security checkpoints monitored by military personnel, both for entering the city and accessing specific locales. For decades, Jewish groups advocating for the construction of the Third Temple have been actively organizing and preparing for this endeavor. They've even fabricated furnishings, utensils, and priestly attire for use in the future sanctuary. Almost annually, on Jewish holidays, these groups have attempted to gain access to the Temple Mount for prayers, contravening the law. Israeli security forces have consistently repelled these attempts. However, in recent years, a growing faction of Jews has initiated a broader campaign advocating for the freedom to pray atop the Temple Mount, challenging the early 1967 status quo agreement concerning the site's administration. Muslims perceive this as a desecration of their third holiest site globally. While Jews assert that Muslims have neglected their site for centuries, Christians also hold that the temple must be rebuilt before the second coming of Jesus Christ. Palestinian Muslims have responded with protests, violence, and the looming threat of a potential new intifada or uprising. Consider the diversity of beliefs across various religions. Yet amidst this diversity, there exists one event that holds significance for all. While some eagerly anticipate this event, others are apprehensive, recognizing the potential for conflict inherent in such historical controversies. One such contentious topic is the red heifer prophecy. Hence, when commentators and internet personalities suggest that a single cow could ignite World War III, they aren't merely jesting. Consequently, concerns arise that the ongoing conflict in Israel could escalate into Armageddon, as prophesied, with the sacrifice of a red heifer potentially serving as its catalyst. Some Jewish individuals even pray for such a conflict, viewing it as an opportunity to reclaim the Temple Mount from Muslim control. While some Jews acknowledge the potential political ramifications and the risk of sparking a war through the sacrifice of a red heifer, this doesn't guarantee immediate conflict or Jewish dominion over the Temple Mount. Instead, many believe it could serve as a rallying cry for Jews to reclaim the site and initiate the temple's reconstruction. It's crucial to recognize that the red heifer represents just the initial step in this complex process. Even after the sacrifice of the red heifer, the construction of the temple would still be necessary, with numerous prophecies outlining its fate. Following Armageddon, Christ intervenes to save the Jews, who subsequently embrace Christianity. However, this event doesn't constitute the second coming as commonly believed, wherein Christ returns in glory and the wicked face judgment. Thus, several prerequisites must be fulfilled before the Savior's second coming, elucidating why many individuals online are anxious about global events. One architect has proposed a theory aimed at averting World War III by challenging the Jewish claim that Muslims erected the Dome of the Rock Mosque on the ruins of their holy site. The resolution of the Temple Mount dispute is crucial for fostering peace in the Middle East. Tuvia Sagiv, the proponent of a groundbreaking theory, posits that if his assertion regarding the temple's location is correct, he could significantly contribute to peacemaking efforts. Conventional wisdom asserts that the Dome of the Rock was built atop the site of the ancient Jewish temple's Holy of Holies. Sagiv, an architect by profession but fervently dedicated to the Temple Mount, has made pioneering discoveries regarding the whereabouts of Solomon's temple. Sagiv's straightforward conclusion challenges the common belief that the temple ruins lie beneath the dome, prompting further inquiry into the most plausible location for the temple. While his theory is intricate, it hinges on three primary pieces of evidence: the architectural footprint, infrared photos, and water flow analysis. Exploring Sagiv's theory, we encounter one of the temple's significant challenges: the provision of water for the high priest's ceremonial ablutions and the purification of the sacrificial court. Given the frequent animal sacrifices, blood accumulation necessitated thorough cleansing. Thus, the temple's primary function was sacrificial, requiring a constant water supply to wash away the blood. Archaeologists claim to have identified the temple's aqueduct. However, if the aqueduct aligns with their assumptions and the temple indeed occupied the dome's location, a significant discrepancy arises. According to Sagiv, the aqueduct lies 20 meters below the dome's elevation, making it impossible for water to flow uphill. Consequently, he asserts that the temple couldn't have stood where the Dome of the Rock now stands. This discrepancy implies that the temple must have been situated elsewhere for the aqueduct to supply the court adequately. Consequently, the majority of archaeologists, rabbis, and historians reject Sagiv's theory. Traditionally, sacred sites are often constructed upon pre-existing ones. For instance, conquistadors built churches atop Mayan temples. Naturally, the Dome of the Rock would be erected over the Jewish temple. Similarly, the Vatican sits atop the pagan temple of Cybele in Attic. This leads us to the second piece of evidence provided by Sagiv, the architectural imprint. The construction of holy sites follows established customs and traditions, as evidenced by archaeological findings. People typically build upon existing sacred locations, regardless of their religious affiliation. This practice is deeply ingrained in tradition. Given this understanding, it raises questions as to why two mosques were constructed elsewhere instead of at the exact location of the temple. Legend has it that following the collapse of the Jewish temple, the Romans erected a pagan temple on the site, subsequently replaced by the Muslims' construction. Although the pagan temple no longer exists, the same architect later designed another temple in Lebanon during the same era, dedicated to the same deity, Jupiter. This suggests that the temple in Lebanon may have served as a prototype for the lost Roman temple on the mount. Upon comparing the layouts of the Temple Mount and the Jupiter Temple, intriguing parallels emerge. It's evident that the mosque beneath the dome and the Jupiter Temple in Baalbek, Lebanon, share striking similarities. Hence, it's plausible that the Dome of the Rock is the remnant of the Jupiter Temple, which the Arabs chose to repurpose into a mosque, cloaking it in Muslim symbolism. If the Muslims didn't construct their mosque atop the Jewish temple, then where is it? Historians offer insight, revealing that the Roman temple featured a horse statue positioned between its two primary structures. This statue once stood in the courtyard, and the area now occupied by trees likely corresponds to the site of the Jewish holy place. Placing the horse atop the Holy of Holies symbolized Roman conquest over the Jewish temple. In Israel, debates persist regarding whether the temple is merely symbolic or if it will be physically reconstructed by divine or human agency. One individual proposes a unique approach to fostering peace in the region, clearing the path for the third Jewish temple. Gershon Solomon advocates for this cause, asserting that reclaiming the Temple Mount aligns with historical justice, as Arab control over the site in Jerusalem cannot endure indefinitely. 15 years ago, Solomon led a march on the Temple Mount, and he currently spearheads the Temple Mount Faithful, an organization dedicated to reinstating the temple destroyed by the Romans over 2 millennia ago. When asked about the feasibility of constructing the third temple at the site of the dome, Gershon proposed a fascinating idea. In a gesture aimed at accommodating Muslims, he suggests that the government relocate the dome back to Mecca. Drawing parallels, he references the relocation of ancient temples in Egypt during the construction of the Aswan Dam, often transported hundreds of kilometers from their original sites. Typically, Solomon's marches attract only a few dozen participants. However, in 1990, when news spread among Palestinians of Solomon's intended visit to the Dome of the Rock, riots erupted, resulting in the loss of 17 lives due to the looming threat of violence. Political and religious sensitivities have prevented any excavation of this sacred ground. Sagiv then took to the air to present the subsequent piece of evidence: infrared footage obtained by Israeli police using a helicopter. Infrared cameras are capable of detecting heat signatures. Analysis of a photo captured in the early morning, when temperatures are cooler, reveals a clear and uniform flow without shadows. Conversely, examination of a photo taken at night, after the land has absorbed heat from the Jerusalem sun throughout the day, reveals distinct straight lines between the trees, with a consistent distance of 10 meters separating each line. This insight becomes especially enlightening when we factor in that the dimensions of the temple walls were precisely 10 meters by 10 meters, with each wall uniformly measuring 10 meters in width. Nonetheless, numerous individuals in Jerusalem, both Jewish and Muslim, dismiss Sagiv's theory as nonsensical. With that, we conclude our exploration of the red heifer sacrifice and its implications. Feel free to share your thoughts on this topic in the comments section below. To stay updated with more enlightening content like this, consider subscribing to our channel and giving us a thumbs up.